With so many characters in One Piece, it is incredibly easy for great characters to kind of fall to the sidelines or be forgotten entirely. You'll always hear people talking about how great Zoro or Luffy, Mihawk, Shanks, all these other very popular recurring characters are. But how often do you hear anybody talk about Fisher Tiger, the character who I think is the most underrated in the entire series? So today we're going to be talking about what makes this guy such an amazing character, and finally giving him his time in the sun. Anyways, let me know which characters you think are underrated, and if you enjoy this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. But with that all being said, let's get into it. To start the story of Fisher Tiger, we need to start with Arlong. We first get a look at Fishmen in the Arlong Park arc, where a group of them has taken over Kokoyashi village, taxing its citizens and holding them all essentially as prisoners, with Nami even being more like a slave to Arlong. It's a clear metaphor for racism, as we have these fishmen painted as absolute monsters. They are brutal and savage, and almost cartoonishly evil, with the exception of Hachi, who is just a jelly bean of kindness. However, Arlong himself is a pure embodiment of racism. He feels that fishmen are superior, and he feels like humans should be serving under him or be classified as lower beings. And as such, he has literally no issue killing or torturing them if he needs to. But that over-the-top evil portrayal actually does something interesting to the viewers. We get this idea that all fishmen, again aside from Hachi, might be savages like this. It's almost like the racism that Arlong holds actually spreads to us in this weird way, because for a long time they were the only fishmen that we ever had the chance to meet. And I want you to hold on to the idea of us never meeting fishmen and therefore not understanding them, because that does come into play again later. Of course, we eventually do meet other fishmen like Jinbei, who is nearly the exact opposite of Arlong in every way when we first interact with him. While Arlong is this absolute monster, Jinbei is just kind of doing his best to live a peaceful life and do the right thing, even choosing to be sent to Impel Down instead of acting against Whitebeard, who was considered the defender or protector of Fishman Island. While Arlong paints this picture of Fishman's superiority, Jinbei instead tends to act for the equality and preservation of fishmen, trying to never do anything that would inadvertently hurt them. But something that was really interesting to a lot of viewers right off the bat was that both Jinbei and Arlong have a sun tattoo, despite being so different, and that leads us to Fisher Tiger and the Sun Pirates. As it turns out, the Celestial Dragons are kind of massive dickbags. They had been abducting random people from all over the world as slaves, and they especially love taking fishmen as they're more resilient and durable than the average person. As a result, a few fishmen like Otohime and Fisher Tiger began very different movements to liberate fishmen and for their equality in the world, with Otohime taking a more social and political route, having people sign signatures to coexist with humanity and wanting to push that towards the world nobles, and Fisher Tiger taking a more aggressive stance where he's kind of in humanity's face. And despite this, Fisher Tiger tends to be a very peaceful and kind person for the most part. He will absolutely defend himself, he will steal food or ships from anyone who attacks him, but he will never go out of his way to attack humanity. And he has this line kind of early in his story, where he's talking to Jinbei and saying that despite both wanting the same thing, and despite acknowledging that Otohime's way is better, she probably sees him and Arlong as almost the exact same. They're both taking aggressive actions to defend against humanity instead of taking more social ones. And he's really down on himself because of this. He does entirely believe in Otohime's goal of equality for fishmen, however they each have very different end goals. Otohime, for the most part, wants humans and fishmen to coexist, to live together and to prosper in one united force. However, Fisher Tiger wants everyone to be seen as equal, that is true, but he does want them to remain separate as well, still segregated but equal. Ideas which are fundamentally opposed to each other, but which completely make sense once you understand his character more. And this dichotomy of these really opposed ideas really speaks to the core of who Fisher Tiger is. He simultaneously believes in two major opposing factors and wants nothing more than for them both to become true. At one point when he's talking to Jinbei, he explains that he had a demon inside of his heart. He often butts heads with Arlong, who only wanted to kill or brutalize humans, but Fisher Tiger wanted a better path, and although he wanted something different, he explains to Jinbei that he completely understands where Arlong is coming from, and he had no right to speak so high and mighty towards someone who thinks the same way he does, telling viewers that despite the way he acts, there is still this massive level of hatred inside of him. We find out on his deathbed that he had been captured by the world nobles and enslaved, and as he described it, he saw the madness of humanity and grew to hate them. Regardless, because he believed in Otohime's ideology so much to his core, he never allowed the idea of revenge or hatred to get in his way or to change his actions. It was hatred while still holding an underlying belief of equality, and most importantly to him, it was the understanding that if they retaliated, humans would retaliate back, most likely with greater force. At one point, a marine ship attacks the Sun Pirates, and both Arlong and Jinbei end up killing humans who were attacking Fisher's ship. Fisher chastises them for their actions, telling them that it isn't about revenge or murder, it's about liberation and nothing else. If they get revenge on humans, then the humans will want revenge on them in an endless cycle of pain. Arlong disagreed because he sees humans as below him, as we mentioned before, but to Fisher, all people were people, despite understanding how humanity feared, looked down on, and treated Fishmen, landing him in this really interesting place between realism and idealism. We see this in his most iconic moment canonically in the story. When breaking back into Marie-Joie to free other slaves, he obviously had the opportunity to only free Fishmen. However, he freed everyone that he could, including every human he came across, such as Boa Hancock and Koala. Basically, regardless of who you were, if you had been branded as a slave by the Celestial Dragons, then he was an ally of yours and would do anything he could to set you free. Understanding that this mark would make them more or less targets for the world government to try and capture and return as slaves, every member of the Sun Pirates crew that had one of these tattoos would brand themselves with a sun over top of it, and every member which didn't have a slave mark would also brand themselves so that everyone would feel like they were united in this force and no one would be set aside as different because they were a slave. The mentality behind the tattoo being that they don't live in shackles anymore and now they're able to live under the sun. This compassion towards humans, despite his hatred of them, continued even to when the Sun Pirates picked up Koala. She was clearly terrified of them. Koala was unable to stop smiling for fear that she would be hit or worse killed. She was emotionally dead, living only with the fear and the memories of being a slave. Jinbei asked if fishmen were so terrifying to her that she would act like this, and she just said yes, but she wanted to see her mother, so she was willing to go through anything, begging again for them not to kill her, and again saying that she would be useful and wouldn't take any breaks as she continued cleaning her own blood off the deck in terror. When Tiger sees how she's living despite being free, he rebranded her with a sun that covered up the dragon's talon, saying that it would be impossible for her to move on with a constant reminder of her life as a slave on her body. Koala does faint in the process, and when she wakes up, she is in a panic. She immediately shoots up and says, "I'm sorry I fainted, but look, I didn't cry, so please don't kill me." This moment is kind of heartbreaking, and Tiger seems to agree as he grabs her and yells, "There's nothing wrong with crying. We aren't the same as the world nobles, we don't kill anyone." And he throws his gun over the edge of the boat to show her that she is safe. Keep in mind, these guys hate humans for what they have done. They hate humans for how they have treated fishmen. Every fishman on the crew begins smiling and cheering. The only one who doesn't is Arlong. But his hatred for humans has less to do with the idea of revenge and more with the idea of classic racism, believing that fishmen are a superior race. So we're kind of putting him in his own special category. He isn't one who's motivated by something that had happened to him specifically, but he is motivated by the fact that he just doesn't like humans. However, every member of the crew which had been negatively affected by humans was overjoyed. Every fishman is not just happy to have brought this human onto their ship, but they are proud that they are helping her. When she was first brought on, the other crewmates scoffed and asked why a human would be let on, saying it was disgusting, and Fisher Tiger just responded saying it was for progress. And this was the moment that they all began to understand what he meant. They fully embraced Koala, buying her clothes, cutting her hair to make her feel more normal, and when she eventually left the boat, they would even cry. Again, Arlong stands alone in opposition to this. He claims that humans just treat fishmen like lesser beings. Parents hate fishmen, and they teach their children, who take that to heart, in this endless cycle. Jinbei interrupts, saying that it only seems like a small percentage actually feel this way. Most humans don't hate them, they just fear them. And Jinbei asks Koala why fishmen are so feared. And she just tells him, well, because we don't know anything about you. Now this parallels what Otohime was saying, that if humans and fishmen would live together, they could coexist and understand each other. But it also goes back to Arlong Park. When we had our first look at fishmen, the only look we had for a long time, and believed that all fishmen were monsters like this. Because we haven't interacted with them, we don't understand them, and we kind of fear or hate them at that point. Fisher would eventually go to bring Koala back to her hometown, and we get this really tense scene where Koala is trying to hold Fisher's hand and he keeps trying to take it away from her, but eventually she takes it and he just looks uncomfortable. Still showing the discomfort with humans, but at the end of the day he's still doing his best to help one. And when she is eventually reunited with her mother, he still can't help but smile. Which is great because there's this hope for the future where Koala will tell everyone about how great fishmen are, and maybe that could start something. As Fisher walks away from the town, Koala shouts out that she'll never forget him and his crew, and it was this really beautiful moment until just seconds later when he's surrounded by Marines who had been tipped off in the town that he was on the island. All of which pointed their guns at him and opened fire until eventually Jinbei saved him. All of this journey, working towards the relationship between fishmen and humans, was undone in a single moment. Tiger was left betrayed and filled with hatred for humans once again. When Jinbei eventually gets him back to the ship, he is told that he needs a blood transfusion to stay alive, and he refuses. Apparently, because they had stolen a marine ship to get away, the only blood available was human blood. And as he put it, he would not survive if it involved putting that filthy blood in him, the blood of those who scorn fishmen. He finally tells his crew that he too was a slave, and he explains that he escaped and couldn't turn his back on the others, even if it meant hindering Otohime's plans for peace. Yet he still understood that peace would be best. Fisher says that the only ones who can change the future are those like Koala, the next generation who don't know anything. As such, his dying wish is that others in the crew don't tell anyone what had happened, not about the tragedy or the betrayal that befell them, and especially not about the anger and disgust that they have for humans. He says that there are plenty of kind-hearted humans in the world, and it's absurd that so many will die knowing nothing but hatred in their heart, but despite that, he can no longer love humans. This character never comes up in discussions about One Piece great moments, and it is a fucking tragedy that this is the case. This was the story of a hero of his people who was captured as a slave, escaped captivity, and went back to free as many other slaves as he could, before dedicating his life to protecting and progressing a dream which the demons in his heart did not believe in. Fisher hated humanity for what they had done to him and all of his people. Yet at the same time, he understood that just because one person harmed you, that doesn't mean that all people are bad. And even more, he understood that getting revenge on humans would never stop this cycle of revenge. If he retaliated, then humanity would just be more aggressive towards fishmen, take more people as slaves, kill more of his brothers and sisters. He knew that the best course of action was to work together in a world where humans and fishmen could coexist and learn about one another. He saved one last girl and brought her home, and then was betrayed for his efforts. The very people he was trying to connect with essentially planned his execution. It's the story of a man fighting against his own heart and experiences for the future of his people, and who would ultimately die for it. A death which would inspire Arlong to dive even deeper into his hatred for humanity, and which would press Jinbei into searching for a better path. I love Fisher Tiger, because it is literally a man who is just doing his goddamn best in a world that rejects him and his kind. And it's something that we see in our own world time and time again. Those who have been wronged and still do their best to move forwards towards peace and equality, many of whom are betrayed for their efforts, but these are some of the most important and impressive people in history, and likewise, Fisher Tiger is one of the most important and impressive people in all of One Piece. If you guys have other underrated or misunderstood characters in anime, please let me know in the comments section down below. I would love to look into some of them. And if you enjoyed this video, or you just didn't remember who Fisher Tiger was because he wasn't around all that much in the series, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. But until next time, treat each other with love and respect, do what's best for tomorrow, and stay excellent.